If you would like to see the uncut version of this video with everything I can't show you on YouTube, or if you would like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/perplexus. Links will be provided down below.
Well, security services here, Jeremy, have told us that this was a suicide attack. They say they found shrapnel in the form of screws and nuts, and it's very interesting at the moment to see the fact that this airport still is functioning. We drove up here.
On the date of January 24th, 2011, at 4:30 p.m., an improvised explosive device brimming with wire and shrapnel detonated within the international arrivals section of Moscow's Domodedovo International Airport. This tragic incident claimed the lives of 35 individuals, while causing injuries to 173 others. Authorities in Russia held the belief that the primary targets were foreign nationals and suspected Chechen radicals to be responsible. Eventually, the perpetrator was identified as a 20-year-old Chechen man named Magomed Yevloyev. Duka Umarov, the founder, took responsibility on behalf of the Caucasus Emirate, a militant jihadist group based in Chechnya, expressing strong opposition towards Russia and other perceived satanic foreign powers. As a result of the attack, several incidents of Muslim graves being desecrated began to occur in the city of Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. Amidst this turmoil, investigators were led to a cemetery, where they stumbled upon a deeply disturbing scene. Anatoly Moskvin, a man connected to the cemetery, was discovered defacing the photographs of deceased Muslims. Subsequently, 8 police officers ventured to his apartment to gather evidence following his arrest. What awaited them within the confines of his residence was nothing short of shocking. Strewn throughout the small living space were 29 life-sized dolls, all meticulously crafted to resemble young females. The gravity of this discovery would soon grip the investigators to their core. Anatoly Moskvin, born on September 1st, 1966, in Nizhny Novgorod, which happens to be Russia's 5th largest city, was an only child. Renowned for his exceptional intellect, many even believed him to possess a genius-level intelligence. He stood out as one of the most accomplished students in his class. However, like numerous highly intelligent individuals, Anatoly was socially awkward and remarkably reserved during his early childhood. Interacting with children of his age proved to be a challenge, leading him to spend most of his time engrossed in solitary reading. In fact, he even taught himself various languages during his free time. When Anatoly was around 9 years old, in the 3rd grade, something traumatic would happen to him that would completely change his demeanor. It is alleged that while he was walking home from school, a man approached him, dragged him out of sight, and assaulted him. He would never tell his parents, or anyone else for that matter, until much later in life, when he was around 50 years old. Still, his parents noticed a drastic change in his behavior. Their meek and mild son turned into an angry child who would experience violent outbursts. His parents had no idea why he had changed, but instead of getting him any sort of help, they backed off and left him to deal with his emotions on his own. As a young boy, Anatoly enjoyed hanging out in cemeteries with his friends. He claims that he was always very interested in the dead and anything related to death, including burial rituals and the occult. There was one incident in particular that he claims had a huge impact on him and really fueled his interest. Moskvin divulged how a group of men in black suits stopped him on the way home from school. They were attending a funeral procession of 11-year-old Natasha Petrova and dragged young Anatoly along to her coffin, where they forced him to kiss the girl's corpse on the lips. "I kissed her once, then again," Moskvin said in a newspaper article. He also said that in some really strange ritual, the girl's mother put wedding rings on his and the dead girl's fingers. As a young adult, he attended Moscow State University, where he studied philology, which is the study of literature and language. He specialized in Celtic history and immersed himself completely in his studies, spending much of his time alone with his nose in books. He didn't date, attend college parties, or engage in drinking or smoking. He mostly lived a secluded life, still residing with his parents throughout university and into his adult years after graduation. Even though he lived in his parents' house, they mostly avoided him as well, choosing instead to travel and spend time away from home. Those who knew Anatoly at this time described him as both a genius and an eccentric. He spoke 13 different languages and wrote numerous books and papers that were well known among his academic colleagues. As an adult, Moskvin led a secluded life. He never married or dated, preferring to live with his parents. He abstained from drinking alcohol and smoking and is purportedly a virgin. Due to his extensive knowledge and interest in everything related to death, local newspapers and publications often sought his contributions whenever they had topics related to the deceased. In fact, Anatoly referred to himself as a necropolist, an expert on cemeteries and the dead. During a 2-year span from 2005 to 2007, Anatoly found his skills put to an unusual task, compiling the names of the departed from over 700 cemeteries in the region. In total, he visited 752 graveyards, practically transforming these sites of eternal rest into his temporary home. He would dine, sleep, and live amidst the tombstones, even going so far as to find rest in empty coffins destined for future burials. It didn't bother him at all. In fact, he thoroughly enjoyed it. He also made regular contributions to a publication called Necrologies, a weekly paper that published obituaries and stories about cemeteries and famous deceased individuals. Some of his article headlines included "Great Walks Around Cemeteries" and "What the Dead Said." The editor of Necrologies later admitted feeling uncomfortable or hesitant about publishing certain articles, particularly those that discussed the incident involving the 11-year-old deceased girl whom Anatoly had been forced to kiss when he was 13. The year 2009 saw a disturbing trend emerge when locals started noticing the desecration of graves, some of which were entirely dug up. The Russian Interior Ministry spokesperson, General Valery Gribakin, revealed their initial suspicion was that these were the acts of extremist organizations. This led to an increased police presence and the formation of specialized groups, comprising the most experienced detectives dealing with extremist crimes. Despite the efforts, for almost 2 years, the investigations reached a dead end. The desecration continued and the motives remained unknown. A breakthrough in the investigation occurred following a terrorist attack at Domodedovo Airport in Moscow in 2011. On November 2, 2011, authorities received reports of Muslim graves being desecrated in Nizhny Novgorod. This led investigators to a cemetery where Anatoly was detained by the police on suspicion of vandalizing a gravesite. It was during the subsequent search of Anatoly's apartment that the police realized they had stumbled upon a real-life horror story. They entered the small apartment and discovered that the unit was completely cluttered with clothing and dresses. There were piles of books and papers scattered all over the floor. But what truly took them aback were the life-sized figures, eerily resembling old-fashioned dolls, dotted throughout the living space. Each figure was dressed in colorful clothing. Some sported knee-high boots, while others had their faces hidden beneath cloth and makeup. Hands were also wrapped in fabric, yet these figures were no dolls. They were, in reality, the mummified corpses of young girls. One of the girl dolls was dressed in a knitted hat, a purple sweater, white tights, and white shoes. She sat up in a corner with her legs crossed. Across the room, there was another doll with curly blonde hair, wearing a silk wedding dress with a long veil. All of them had their faces covered with beige fabric and painted eyes. The police soon discovered that all of these dolls were, in fact, mummified corpses of human girls. The youngest girl was only 3 years old, while the oldest was around 25 years old. In total, 29 bodies that had been stolen from their graves, preserved, and dressed as dolls were recovered from the apartment. When the police moved one of the bodies, it triggered music to play as if on cue. Inside the chests of many of the dolls, Moskvin had embedded music boxes. One mummy even had a piece of her own gravestone with her name inscribed on it placed inside her body. Another doll contained a hospital tag indicating the date and cause of the girl's death. A dried human heart was found within a third body. Along with the creepy dolls, the apartment housed stolen headstone nameplates, cemetery maps, and doll-making guides using human bodies. Based on this evidence, police theorized that the actual count of stolen bodies might exceed the 29 found in Moskvin's home. The shoes found in Moskvin's apartment matched the footprints discovered near the desecrated graves, leaving no doubt for the police that they had found their grave robber. Back at the station, Moskvin confessed to crafting these horrifying dolls over a decade. While technically sharing the apartment with his parents, they had no knowledge of what these dolls truly were. His 83-year-old mother, Elvira, would later state, "We saw these dolls, but we never suspected there were dead bodies inside. We thought it was his hobby to make such large dolls, and we didn't see anything wrong with it." Despite an occasional foul smell wafting from his apartment, neighbors never guessed at his grotesque activities. Moskvin was known to be a recluse, but was always polite when they crossed paths. Moskvin openly admitted to filling the decomposed bodies with rags, covering their faces with nylon tights, or affixing doll faces onto them. He inserted buttons or toy eyes into the empty eye sockets of the girls, believing this would allow them to watch cartoons with him. The historian claimed to have a deep affection for his dolls, although there were a few in his garage that he admitted to growing to dislike. He confessed that he resorted to grave robbery of young girls because he felt lonely. Being single, his greatest aspiration was to have children. However, Russian adoption agencies denied his application due to his insufficient income. In hindsight, given the state of his cluttered apartment and his disturbing obsession with the deceased, it may have been for the best. Moskvin further revealed that his actions were driven by his anticipation of scientific advancements that could bring the dead back to life. In the meantime, he used a simple mixture of salt and baking soda to preserve the bodies of the girls. He even celebrated their birthdays as if they were his own children. To locate these children, he would search through obituaries. If he encountered an obituary that resonated with him, he would visit the child's gravesite and actually sleep on it. He believed that through this act, he could discern whether the spirit of the deceased child desired to be resurrected. According to Anatoly, he claimed to have obtained the full consent of these children to dig them up, emphasizing that he would never disturb the resting place of a child who did not give their permission. Eventually, his discomfort with sleeping on graves led him to exhume the bodies, bringing them home to sleep beside him, hoping to hear them speak. If a child expressed their desire to be brought back to life, Moskvin would proceed with the process of mummification using salt and baking soda. He would then carefully dry out the bodies and attempt to transform them into dolls by wrapping them in cloth and fabric to create a more lifelike appearance and texture. To prevent the bodies from collapsing during decomposition, he would stuff them with rags. Finally, he would dress them in clothing, apply wigs, and apply makeup to enhance their sense of comfort. Facing multiple grave desecration charges, which could lead to a 5-year prison sentence, Moskvin admitted to 44 counts of grave abuse and desecration in court. However, in 2012, he was found unfit to stand trial and was instead committed to a psychiatric hospital, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He brazenly declared to the parents of his victims, "You abandoned your girls, I brought them home and warmed them up." Russian media soon labeled him the Lord of the Mummies and the Perfumer, a nod to Patrick Susskind's novel Perfume. Every year, Anatoly has undergone re-evaluations to determine his fitness for criminal charges. Each time he has been deemed unfit for trial, spending 11 years in a mental hospital with authorities denying his release. Yet, in April 2023, psychiatric professionals began advocating for his discharge, as there was no longer a medical rationale to confine him. It's speculated that he may receive a revised diagnosis of incapacitated, which would permit him to live with friends or relatives, avoiding institutionalization. However, the parents of his victims are vehemently opposed to his release, and his potential freedom has sparked widespread outrage. Among them is Natalia, the mother of a 10-year-old victim, Olga, who has been leading the charge against his release. Natalia shared her fears. "The recent news of his potential release is incredibly distressing. I worry that he might revert to his old ways. I have no confidence in his rehabilitation. He is fanatical. The thought of him finding her reburial site and us having to go through the exhumation and reburial process again is unbearable. My health is failing, and I can't stand the thought of enduring another tragedy. Life is hard enough as it is." On the other hand, Anatoly desires to be released so that he can marry his girlfriend, whom he met during his trials, and work as a foreign language tutor. He appears ready to ignore the past and move forward with his life, as if his horrific actions were a mere figment of imagination.